At Shine, it is our effort to bring a sharp business perspective to the HR conversation, and hence we begin by asking CEOs about people issues as organizations scale up to sustainability and nurture the entrepreneurial spirit at scale. Our topic being an entrepreneurial culture built by or nurture. And we have CEOs as part of this panel who will share their macro perspectives. On the panel, and as I announce their names, if I could request them to please join me up on stage, Mr. Krishna Kumar Natarajan, co-founder, CEO, and managing director, Mindtree, and chairman, NASCOM India. Mr. Murthy Uppaluri, MD and CEO, Randstad India. Mr. Virender Agarwal, CEO, Ramco Systems. Mr. Mark Efron, President, the Talent Strategy Group. And as our moderator, we have Mr. R. Sukumar, editor, Mint. Mr. Krishna Kumar has over 30 years of IT industry expertise and is a respected authority in the global IT sector. He has played key roles in Mindtree, including setting up its US operations, driving expansion in Europe, Asia Pacific, and transforming Mindtree's IT services business. Today, Mr. Kumar's mission as CEO is to lead the company to be an expertise-led organization. He's also the chairman of NASCOM and chairs the Emerging Companies Forum, working towards strengthening the Indian IT industry to be a globally competitive ecosystem comprising large and emerging companies. Mr. Murthy Uppaluri is a successful business leader of global standing and heads India's leading HR services organization, Randstad India. He has a commendable track record of building profitable businesses and organizational capability, with over 23 years of domestic and international experience with Fortune 500 organizations like Microsoft, GE, and other industry leading companies. He has experience of diverse sectors like engineering, technology, and manufacturing. He's credited with evolving business strategy, growing market share, improving process and operational excellence, and driving innovation and fostering a customer-centric culture in the organizations he has worked for. Mr. Virender Agarwal has a proven track record in building business and has a keen interest in new technologies. As CEO of Ramco Systems, he has been at the forefront, leading it to become a cloud ERP player, primarily focusing on evaluating new market opportunities and attracting strategic partnerships. Prior to Ramco, Mr. Agarwal was president and APAC region head for HCL Technologies Singapore. Mr. Mark Efron, president of the Talent Strategy Group. He's a sought-after speaker on talent management and leadership topics by both corporations and conferences. He's widely quoted on talent issues in the business media and has been recognized as one of the top 100 influencers in HR. He's founded the New Talent Management Network, a non-profit HR networking and research organization that is now the world's largest talent management organization with more than 2,500 members. Moderating this discussion are Sukumar, editor Mint, India's second largest and fastest growing business newspaper, an engineer and an MBA. He's held senior editorial positions in the Hindu Business Line, where he began his career in Business Today before joining HD Media. He has an enduring interest in technology, business strategy, and comic books. Mr. Sukumar.
Thank you. Okay, we'll jump right into it. I'll try and set the context, and then we'll have what to my mind is hopefully going to be a very interesting discussion on a fairly radical topic. Before I took on a management job, I used to be a journalist and I used to cover tech. So all through the 90s, I covered tech, and the 90s was a good period to cover tech. Companies were doubling in size every year, and it was a great time. 30% profit margins were common. No one would raise their eyebrows. Raises would happen twice, sometimes 3 times a year, right? I'm sure KK remembers all the good old days. Towards the end of the decade, I think it was 98 or 1999, I used to work for a magazine then. We collaborated with a global consulting firm to launch what was India's first best companies to work for survey. Now, of course, this is proliferated like the rash. You know, you've got some 20 different surveys. But back then, it was the only one of its kind. And I remember anchoring the first three of them. And the first one, I think Infosys came out on number one, right? And predictably, because everyone thought it was the company to admire and everything else. The second one came out 18 months after the first one, and by then, you know, the dot-com bubble had burst, telecoms were in a bit of a slowdown, and Infosys was not part of the top 25. But it helped us because, you know, nothing sells like bad news. So the first edition of the survey we did, Infosys was on the cover, and the second edition of the survey we did, Infosys was still on the cover, except now the story was on why it was no longer the best company to work for in India. And while doing these exercises, we had a good opportunity to study the strange species known as the software employee, right? And they were a spoiled lot in those days. You know, I've had HR people complain very strongly about how these guys could get irritated if the grape juice in the canteen got over before they had had it. And you know, it would become a big issue and mails would be sent back and forth and everything else. But what we've seen since then is the sector has changed, the nature of the business has changed. The software sector is no longer hiring as many people as it used to hire. In fact, I think this year it's not hiring at all. I'm sure KK will correct me at some point in time. And as a result, there are lots of engineers, and India produces close to 2 million engineers every year. And unfortunately, because of the IT boom, it doesn't matter what your discipline is, everyone wants a job in IT. And many of them are left jobless and everything else. And at the same time, we are also noticing that there's a certain change in the profile of the software employee. Right? All through the 90s, you had people from the best engineering colleges would do one of two things. One, they would go in for what is popularly known as further studies in this part of the world, which means they would go and do an MS or they would go and do an MBA. Or the other thing was they would all go to work for the tech companies. So the Infosys, the Wipros, and KK spent a long time in Wipro, and he knows there's a lot of people went to work for these companies. And entrepreneurship was by and large fairly rare even in those days. The possible exception being the company that KK worked for, because through the 2000s, I think there were some 40, 50 companies which came out, even when the sector was doing very well, from Wipro. There were senior managers in Wipro who would quit and start companies. I have no idea whether this says something about the company or about the people, but they were anyway leaving and starting companies on their own. But today, you know, if you look at circa 2013, the sector is in some sort of trouble. All companies have challenges, and everyone is looking at ways in which they can achieve what they call nonlinear growth, right? Because for a long time, growth in the software services sector was really, or growth in India's software sector was contingent on adding people. You added X number of people, you would add $10 million to the revenue, and there was a direct correlation. And companies are now looking for a magic pill which will sort of help them make that leap. And at the same time, you have employees beginning to get restless because they're looking at the world around them. The entrepreneurial ecosystem in India seems to have changed. There are angel investors, there are venture capitalists, there are even private equity firms which sometimes invest in early stage technology companies. Quite rare, but you know, there are a handful of such instances, so money is not so hard to come by. And you also have the fact that there are a lot of people, especially in a city like Bangalore, who worked for a large technology company for some time, maybe in India, maybe outside, and who've got enough money to not require funding for at least the first year or 2 years of their lives. And so you're beginning to see this wave of entrepreneurship happening even in a bad time, right? I think especially in a bad time, it's good to have entrepreneurship, because if people are frightened of losing their jobs, the best thing to do is to quit and start something on your own, right? That way you'll never get fired. It'll be interesting to hear from the panel, and because we have a diverse range of opinions, or I hope we have a diverse range of opinions on this panel. We have a HR consultant who also runs staffing services company. We have a management and leadership trainer. KK represents the industry, and I'm going to use him as a foil for what everyone calls tier one software companies. He's after all the head of NASSCOM, all the barbs will be aimed at him. And Virender heads a company which was among the early pioneers of software products and also as software as a service, and we'll try and understand from them whether there is something in the nature of the work that people do which can help them retain people, motivate them better, foster entrepreneurs within the company, but working for the company's benefit, not really splitting and going out and doing something. So I'm going to start with, obviously, I'm going to start with KK because I think the big challenge is really for tier one companies because they have lots of people, and unfortunately for many of them, much of their revenue still comes from, despite everything that you read in all other newspapers other than Mint, much of their revenue still comes from plain vanilla services in many ways. What is it that these companies can do to make sure that the entrepreneurial energies sort of kick in? I promise I've said my piece, so you won't hear any more monologues from me. I hope we have a lively discussion. If you have any questions, I'm told there are, there's a Twitter hashtag. I don't know whether there's an SMS, but is there an SMS? There is, yeah, and you can just send your questions there and they'll appear on the screen and we'll take it. We'll have the discussion for around an hour, and after that we'll throw it open for questions. KK, all yours.
Thanks, Sukumar. In fact, when the introduction was made, this is largely an event consisting of HR professionals. I felt very comfortable because I know many of you wouldn't have known that I ran HR for Wipro for 4 years, and many times I pass off almost like I'm one of you, so that some of the observations which I make get a little more credibility in terms of coming in. Now, I think it's a very key question which Sukumar raised, saying that today the Indian IT industry employs close to about 2.3 million direct jobs, and it's created close to about 10 million of indirect jobs. But the way in which the industry is changing, I think the expectations of customers are dramatically shifting. What I think a terminology which I use internally and even externally for the first 20 years, I think the industry had a lot of tailwind. Pretty much it was an audit-taking industry. The client used to tell us what to do, and you have great execution capability within the organization. I think the ground is shifting dramatically. I think you need to be far more market-facing or looking client backwards, which necessarily means you need to build deep business understanding, understand the client business, and be more expertise-driven, which has a dramatic impact on the organization in terms of change. You can no more just be an execution engine, but you need to talk the language of the customer, which really means that mindsets have to change. Mindsets have to change from cost competitiveness to value. And this is the sort of change transformation which every company which is a part of the IT industry is undergoing. And change of this nature is never easy. I think what one realizes is that not everybody within the industry will make the change. I think every organization is trying its own way in terms of how to drive that change. One is to change the mindset. The second thing is, in this industry, every time, I think technology or new disruptive technologies really change business models. If the Indian IT industry innovated to create the global delivery model, and the fundamentals of it was in a way possible with technology change like communication links and the way in which you could build software seamlessly in a remote manner, I think the next level of disruptions are going to come with what you call the SMAC, social, mobile, cloud, and analytics. And worldwide, it's proven that innovation really happens in smaller companies, and once they've been brought to a certain level of proof of concept, then probably larger companies acquire them, which is why I think, yes, on one hand is the problem of transition, which a large number of members of the industry need to make in terms of mindset. On the other hand, there's a great opportunity because Today is really the stage at which there is a new change coming in, and that change is going to be driven by innovative companies which are going to think very differently in terms of how these disruptive technologies could be used in a business context. And which is where I see that the scale of the Indian IT industry is actually a big advantage. Here again, let me just sort of actually give you a real experience which I've sort of gone through in the last 7-8 months. I think really realizing the potential of some of these new technologies, at NASSCOM we launched a key program called 10,000 Tech Startups, and the vision was in the next 6 to 7 years, there'll be 10,000 technology startups out of India. When we really started thinking through it and then sort of launched it, we said, hey, I think people in the Indian context still are shy of taking risks. We'll probably get about 300, 400 people opting to start companies of their own. But I must tell you, in the first 90 days, 3,300 people who were a part of the IT industry connected with this program came up with ideas in terms of what they wanted to do in terms of a business. Finally, we shortlisted about 370 of them, and about 70 of them are already moving to the next stage where, like Sukumar rightly said, I think the ecosystem for risk capital is becoming far more easier to manage. Angel risk capital, we have tied up with SIDBI to give working capital without an asset-based funding and so on. So the response was absolutely overwhelming, which necessarily means that, yes, if you look at it from a glass half full syndrome, you could say that, okay, I feel my job might be at stake, so I'm wanting to do entrepreneurship. But other hand, what we found was the tremendous amount of positive energy saying, what could we do now with our understanding of the customers and build something which becomes valuable in the context of building a business. So this is just one data point. I'd also like to share a data point which I have at Mindtree. About 2 years back, we internally launched a program called 5x50. What that means was we gave people the option of saying that come up with business ideas, and we want each idea to be at least 50 million in 3 to 4 years. So we will fund 5 of those ideas. So about 30 different proposals came, we shortlisted, 9 of them went through a fairly detailed evaluation, 2 finally qualified, and we actually behaved like a venture capital, because I think the people who sort of went in with the idea took compensation cuts. They didn't have any increase. They worked like a startup company within Mindtree itself. One of them actually died because they ran out of funding, and they got back to their original jobs. Whereas one has survived, reached a certain stage. Today we're saying, how can we take them on to the next stage, even in terms of spinning it out? So I don't think the entrepreneurial energy within the industry is anywhere low. I think it's really at a high at this point in time. People are seeing real opportunities available to build a business. What I think really needs to get structured is really the ability to support that, not just in terms of risk capital, but how do you really mentor them, how do you really get them the right market access, and really build a few sustainable businesses, but with a mindset that there will be numerous failures also. I think in entrepreneurship, that's a fundamental mindset with which we need to look at, is more the idea and the energy and passion which people bring in, and probably just 1 or 2 out of 10 ideas will succeed. So as long as we bring in that mindset of, in a sense, appreciating and really applauding failure and really generating positive ideas and businesses to grow, I think we'll really convert this platform to a great opportunity for India's continued success in the IT industry. So I think this is a great level of energy, and I'm very optimistic about it. And it's not coming from a push. I think it's really coming from a pull in terms of what people think they can achieve.
Okay, thanks, KK. Lots of talking points, and we'll come back to them. But before that, I want to just get a bit of a perspective from Virinder, because Ramco is an interesting company at so many levels. The thing is, if you want to be an innovative, high-risk model kind of company, you can go out and do something different. which sometimes can just prove ahead of its time, right? And then it takes a long time uh, to sort of get some kind of traction in the market, which is, to my mind, at a very broad level, what happened with Ramco. If you go back and if you really look at the progress that Ramco has made, and you look at the early history of the company, because it's always been a product-centric company. It didn't fall into the, I wouldn't, for want of a better word, trap, right? But that lots of other companies got into. And the good thing about doing something like that is it obviously gives people the feeling that they're doing something else, they're right there at the edge, they're innovating, they're different from lots of other companies. The bad thing is business performance is not very good. The company is not doing very well. And at the end of the day, I think employees get affected when the company doesn't do well. So how was it for you to sort of strike that balance? Do you think things have really changed now to a situation where, let's assume the next Ramco system, someone starts a company like yours, it's going to be far easier for them because expectations have changed, the ecosystem have changed. Can you just tell us?
Yeah, I think Sukumar has been very polite. Essentially, what he says is you showed early promise and why you didn't deliver. So you should have been SAP and Oracle from India. And it's like, our story is like of, Amrit Raja of tennis. So those who know that he possibly reached one quarter-final or one semi-final, and after that he never reached any Grand Slam.
But he was in the top 10 for a long time.
Top 10 for a long time. Yeah. So I think
won the Volvo Masters 4 times in a row, which no one has.
I think we were also top 10 for a very long time in ERP market. So first thing for being a product company is your domestic market has to be very big. So if you see SAP, Germany has been a huge manufacturing market, and Oracle, US is a huge market. So if a domestic market is not big, it's very difficult for a product company to become big. Second mistake we all make is we spend tremendous amount of time on making a product, very little time on marketing it. If you see, I won't name the companies, they're all over the world touting their product, which I don't think is even getting made right now. So we as a country are people who don't sell or market. We just make it and hope that people will beat to our door, bend on a single knee and say, can I use your product? That doesn't happen. So you have to market, brand. And typically companies in our business, cloud software, enterprise market spend 50 to 65% of their revenue on branding and marketing. So that's a very essential part. The question that you asked, will Ramco make it this time to the big stage? See, we have, the Indian IT industry grew big because of the tectonic shift in technology at that point of time. We were getting 64 kbps link. It was now possible to work remotely on somebody else's computer sitting somewhere else. Now the tectonic shift that is taking place, which KK mentioned as SMAC, is cloud and mobile, two essential elements of which are making the shift take place. So it makes it a lot more easier for anybody to set up a business and sell the product. You no longer have to go and install. So that makes it easier for your question that an entrepreneur starts today, they have a better chance of success. And also courtesy Google AdWords, you don't need feet on the ground, salespeople on the ground to get opportunities. For example, we get about 300 or so opportunities a day based on the Google AdWords platform that we have, out of which 20 translate to real addressable leads and 1 or 2 materialize because of that. So we don't have to have people generating leads. They sell. Once the lead comes, they sell. So that is now possible. You don't need to have a big force, offices in various countries, legal entities in various countries, because your product can be delivered now. So you don't have, I'm sure tax guys will come, but right now, you can use their product sitting anywhere else in the world. So that makes it easier. So that's the next thing. If any budding entrepreneur is there, it's a lot more easier for them to make it happen. And what's different at Ramco this time is, I think we are in the hottest enterprise market space. If you see Workday, they IPO'd just about a year back. At the time of IPO, they were about $250, $300 million in revenue or somewhere in that range. And they IPO'd with $8 billion. Now they're at $13 billion. If you see many other companies, SuccessFactors was bought for $3.3 billion by SAP with a revenue of 300 million. Similarly, Taleo was bought for about $2 billion. So enterprise tech market space is the hottest space in the world today. I think the social media has had its day. So we had Facebooks, we had Twitters, but I don't think we see another hot social media company rising to the charts. So we think we are at the right place at the right time. It's just a matter of execution now and having the money to build the brand and take the big boys head on. We see a tremendous opportunity in the HR space. Our product is absolutely world class. Wherever we have shown demos, it's on par with whatever else best in the world exists. It runs on Androids, it runs on iPhones, so it's as modern as it gets. I think we have a fair chance to make it happen this time. And we are spending a lot more on marketing than we used to. I still think much lesser than we should, but a lot more than we are a lot more outward focused company than we used to be. So I think we have a fair go this time.
Thank you. Can we just, I think this side of the panel finds it very difficult to understand what he's saying because I think the acoustics are somehow bad. It doesn't matter for me because I'm a journalist. I always hear what I want to hear. Right? but for the rest of them, it's a bit of a problem. So can we just sort that out? Thank you. Virendra, thanks. Again, interesting points on how the whole thing has changed, and thank you for being very candid about what happened to you in the early days. I wasn't being polite, it's not, I was just telling it to you as I saw it, just because I don't think business performance should be the only metric by which you measure a business, and then say whether it's a good business or a bad business. We're all not analysts in a market. I'm going to go to Murthy, and because from where you sit, you've obviously been, of all the people on the panel, you're probably the best place to tell us how employees have changed, right? Because what we've understood so far is that the companies have changed, the investing ecosystem has changed, the market has changed, and the delivery models have changed, where all the enabling pieces are there. But what about employees? When they join a company, any company, it needn't be a software company. I don't think we should restrict ourselves to software now. But when people join a company, are there more of them who are now looking at doing interesting things, which is the whole innovation thing that came up? Are there more of them who are looking at doing their own thing, which is the entrepreneurship thing that came up? What does your research show? What has your experience been?
Yeah, very, very interesting question. I think probably I'm speaking to a good diverse set of audience. There are younger generation, Gen X, Gen Y, or whatever we want to call. It's been a paradigm shift as I look at the ecosystem as we've gone through. The younger folks would want to learn. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. No, I pulled the mic closer. Yeah. So the audience, or probably the workforce, I should say, have grown to learn differently. When you look at the younger generation, they learn more outside of a classroom than what they learn in a classroom. So when they come to work, they expect the readiness programs or the continuous development programs that you have to be significantly different. Probably, it's not like so much into putting them into a classroom and teaching them a bunch of stuff and expecting them to go do. They do not like the culture of going and doing what's being prescribed to them. It is not just like what I think KK has alluded to, from becoming an execution-oriented, raw kind of a culture to problem solving. And they would like to be empowered, they would like to be trusted, and they would like to be seeing a change in their portfolio. The days are gone when people will take on a job or a role or a company and stick with the company for multiple years, as probably my parents or our parents would have done. Stick with one company. That doesn't exist, and it used to be a stigma to get from one company to the other, long time gone. Right? Now it is a trend to take on new challenges, new careers, cut across career paths. Just look at me, coming from a manufacturing to a technology or IT background to a HR services domain. So you embrace challenges and you want to learn differently, and you want to be keeping your mind fresh, and you want to be rewarded instantly, quickly, and you want to be known that you are important, you want to feel like unique. I'll give you a quick example. Probably the mode of learning, when you look at the classrooms, people used to come to the classroom to listen to the teacher, scribe something on the board, everybody takes notes, and probably take the same questions as homework and do the homework and come back. It's like a team. India constantly fostered, how to be a part of the team, and there is no individualism. Now if you want innovation, it stems from individualism, diversity of thinking. People used to say like everybody needs to look alike, think alike, function alike. And because it's easy for companies to manage workforces, the scale or what have you, but now it's all about diversity. So if you want to be an innovative workforce, obviously you need to understand what the expectations of the people are and thereby create such an environment. And even hiring the talent. People used to go to maybe tier 1 schools or the best schools and only hire. Innovation, there is no correlation. Probably any one of you, if you do a little bit of research, wouldn't tell you the highest amount of innovation does not necessarily come from the tier 1 or Ivy League schools only. So we need to be very conscious of the fact of what creates this innovation and put them in front of customers. The days are gone where organizations could build centers of excellence through focused and siloed functions. So now people need to be rotating through the jobs. People would take like, hey, I've been in the back end, or so to say, the back office or back end, and now I want to be in the front end to understand the customer issues so that I grapple with those challenges and be a solution provider. So I think the whole ecosystem is changing, right from the way you learn to the way you work and to what you expect, whether it is the rewards or recognition or the career growth and what have you. So if we want to be successful in this changing market and with the changing expectation of the next generation of folks, we as the employers or most of the HR folks here, we need to be creating that environment that enables each of these elements and create this workforce that is more motivated. Else, we will have great people in not great jobs, or right people. I love that, the brilliant test in the rightest jobs or what have you, the tagline. So I think the problem is, it can be both ways. If you have the right people in wrong jobs, too bad. Or if you have wrong people in right jobs, too bad. So you need to get the combination right. And people are never wrong. I have come to believe and learn over the 25 years of my work experience, people cannot be wrong. The managers, as we are, need to understand what is the best fit. You need to fit the right glove, the hand in the glove. When you can fit the right, match the passion and the capability of an individual, it can do wonders. Most people come from great schools, Ivy League schools, and they are either subject to the bad performance systems that we might have. You might try to fit them under a curve, and all of a sudden, until you bring them on board, you tell them you are the best, you are the best looking person. It's almost like a typical date and a marriage. You are the best looking woman I have known, honey, I love you. You marry and then you forget to even say I love you. When was the last time you would have said that? Same thing happens with the employees, in my opinion. People are said, oh, you're the best talent, I need to hire you, I'll give you a sign-on bonus, get them on board. But there's hardly anything being done in terms of continuing to nurture them or to reward them. We believe we are doing all of that. But are we being in tune with the latest developments is all we need to think about. I'll stop there. So several things that we have to do differently.
Yeah, thanks, Murthy. Again, lots of points about fit and what companies need to do. Of course, he made the point about people shifting jobs very often and all that. And in light of that, I'm told he's accepting resumes during the coffee break that will follow. If someone of you wants to reach out to him. Mark, we've got the context. A big question now is, actually I have a series of questions related to this. If you're a company, how do you make this work for you? Because the business has changed, the kind of needs your people have changed. In many ways, I think this whole desire for innovation and entrepreneurship is probably the most higher order need that we'll ever know. Right? If you were to go back and look at the pyramid and all that, and how does a company get all this to work for them?
Sure. Well, first, Sukumar, I find that the context of the discussion interesting. So I've been coming to India for 12 years now, And I come here because I've always felt there's a tremendous entrepreneurial spirit in this company, in this country. Every Indian business leader I meet with, I kind of get that spirit from. So this panel almost sounds like the beauty queen asking, am I pretty? So my view is this is probably more about sustaining the level of entrepreneurial thinking than about trying to find something that has been lost. Because trust me, I work with large companies all around the world, and this is not to flatter my hosts, India has an entrepreneurial spirit that is one standard deviation above what I see elsewhere. I mean, I wish we had this in the U.S. So I think part of this is about just understanding how do you sustain this, but I also think from a company perspective, how do you really make it work? Let's start with a fundamental question. Do we want every single employee to be innovative? Personally, I don't. I want a subsegment of the population to be very innovative and everyone else to do a very good job. Innovation without any practical application is just wasted energy. So the question is, do you know what percentage of that population, or even kind of what individuals you really want to focus on being more innovative? And then some of this is just the basic mechanics of HR. So do your managers, or are your managers held accountable for driving innovation? Do they know how to do that? Do they know how to coach? Do they know how to encourage? Are managers held accountable, and do they know their responsibilities for actually driving innovation? And what's the metric going to be? So how are you going to know if your manager is actually producing or spurring innovation? So is there kind of a clear charge to managers, and is there a clear way of helping them to understand, are you doing a good job at this? But also helping employees to understand what the rules of the road are in that company. So is innovation the only path to success? If so, then let people know that very clearly, that we're going to value our innovative employees more than others. Or is innovation just one way that you can contribute? If so, then let people know that. And let people know what you're going to do. And I heard great comments from KK and others about what that environment needs to be like, how you need to communicate with those employees about what it means to be successful, give them opportunities to strike out on their own and to fail if they need to fail, because we all know that's where the greatest learning comes from. So I think a lot of this really goes to some of just the fundamentals of HR. Do you know the population you want to have display that behavior? Are you going to hold their managers accountable for helping them to display that behavior? And are you going to let the employees know you value that behavior? So there's lots of tips and tricks that we can get into, but I would start at that very high level of who do you want to have in your organization to show more entrepreneurial behaviors? And let's make sure both they and their managers are very clear about what that means.
Thanks, Mark. I think that sort of sums up the first round of discussions. It'll be good if we can get that Twitter feed that I see from the corner of my eye on this monitor, so that in case I run out of things to ask, I can just pick something up from there. KK, question for you, as representative of big business on this panel. How does scale figure into all this? Because for a long time, and even now, I think to some extent, one of the key requirements of success in the software services space, especially, not so much products, is really scale, right? You need to have that. And when you have scale and you have 20,000 people, or you have 120,000 people, it's very, very difficult to sort of focus on individuals. You can have, company-wide innovation programs, entrepreneurship programs and all that, but it's very, very difficult to manage the softer aspects of innovation and entrepreneurship. What are your views on that? And as a supplementary to that, for Murthy, HR, right? For a long time, HR in IT companies was how fast can you hire? Can you, early years when facilities and logistics were a big problem, can you make sure there are buses for everyone to drop them home, canteens, gyms, all those things? Very, very administrative aspect of HR. Unfortunately, the whole outbound visa business also became part of HR, so that's another aspect of HR which got involved. And suddenly you're telling these people, all this is fine, but you also need to look at higher order needs. So after KK finishes, I'd like you to comment on how HR has changed. So KK.
Maybe I'll start with a disclaimer that I don't represent big businesses. I want to think of myself as being still small and nimble. But I think it's a very interesting question because If you look at today, I think the largest company, and probably it's now amongst the top 10 in terms of market cap in the world, TCS, is about 250,000 people. And for a moment, if I assume the same logic of growth of revenue is going to comply with, and there's going to be some productivity improvement, it is not out of context to imagine that TCS will be a company with 500,000 people in the next maybe 4-5 years. And if you look at the history of business, I don't think there's been business models, organizational structures, systems and process to manage a globally diverse pool of 500,000 people. So I think we're getting into the type of management sort of complexities which have never been addressed earlier. So to that extent, I think the approaches which I see large companies doing is to sort of break them up into smaller pieces. I think Chandra did it brilliantly in terms of dividing it into 17 different units. And honestly, when I talk to many people from the large companies, it's almost like they are independent companies. It's just that I think for financial purposes, there is an entity which is sort of listed. Again, I don't think that's the only solution, because ultimately, I think to really try and be in touch with the person and engage with him, it's a very different sort of approach. What makes it also complex, I think someone mentioned it, I think for the first time in this industry, there are 4 generations of people working together. Typically, the over 50s like me who are sort of brought up in a very different sort of scenario. Somebody mentioned when you join a company, you work almost for lifetime, which is what I thought I'll do with Wipro before starting Mindtree. Then you have the baby boomers who are a very different thing, the Gen X and Gen Y. Very simple elements of employee engagement or communication is very different across these 4 different sort of generations. To the extent I've almost given up sending mass emails to everybody at Mindtree, because we found that a number of Gen Y have put it as a part of their outlook, saying mail from KK delete, so it doesn't even sort of get open. So I think then obviously as people you have to change. So I tried getting into Facebook, created a group, but the fact is I'm not a great Facebook user. So actually I'm struggling to sort of get to know how do you really communicate with them. So I think starting from in a knowledge business or engagement is very important. I think a lot of us are struggling in terms of saying what works with what group. To the extent I think innovation is becoming far more a tricky sort of issue. I think the complexity is also coming. Like I mentioned earlier, our customers are happy if you do a job, reduce cost, and consistently deliver SLAs. Today, customers are no more happy with that. They're saying, what is the new idea which you're bringing in? Every quarterly steering committee meeting says, what is the innovation which you've done? So the early sort of response to that has been making a set of very jazzy slide or a PowerPoint presentation which nobody understands, including the person who made it. And the fact is now customers are getting smarter. They're saying, forget all of this, tell us what is it you're delivering from business outcome. And I think you need to look at even creating that energy of innovation really at 2 levels. One is, what is the sort of incremental change which you'll make to demonstrate that, yes, you are constantly making progress, which even I think organizations are finding it tough, because I think we're not really oriented even towards doing it. That itself, I should confess at Mindtree, we are sort of struggling with that in terms of how do we even incrementally innovate to make the customer feel, yes, I think you're bringing some new value on the table. 2, really creating breakthrough ideas which will really take us on to a new orbit. One is almost coming around to the thing that I think in a large organization to try and drive breakthrough sort of ideas is almost sort of next to impossible. To the extent one of the models we're seriously exploring now, I talked about the 5x50, is to really sort of spin these off or even keep them away from the main part of the organization. Because what happens is, I think the moment you even create an entrepreneurship within the organization, keep them independent, still they get all the bad qualities of a big fat cat. Because coffee is served on the table, when something happens, they don't need to think. But when you're in a startup, I think you need to completely manage end to end, and you need to get the pain of understanding how do I get my first 2 customers. So I think we are coming around to a thing that, yes, it can be fostered, but the fact is there are no silver bullet solutions for that.
Thanks, KK. Murthy?
Yeah, I think you asked me to address from a HR perspective. I think, I was just, in my mind's eye, I was just dividing the HR functions into 4 segments probably, right? I would call it as attract, retain, develop, and enable, let us say. And in no matter which segment I look at, I'm looking at the HR leader's job becoming more cross-functional, from being a functional HR leader, and actually more than HR, I love the term HCM, right? Human capital management. And the moment you say that you are managing human capital and not just the human resources you might try to be saving and other things. So once you're a capital manager and you think about multiple variations, multiple gyrations, for example, I think about attracting talent. How are we attracting talent? Today you become, you need to become very savvy about the digital channels that exist. And you are engaging vendors, particularly whenever you are in a rampant growth phase, or you are kind of thinking about, hey, I'm not growing as much, and maybe I'm growing at a declining rate, or maybe I'm trying to ramp down a little bit. No matter what stage of life cycle of your business you might be in, you are actually being a business partner to the CEO, and you need to wear these cross-functional hats in terms of the digital channels that you need to leverage to attract talent, or in terms of the vendor channels that you will engage for creating flexible staffing, or you might want to engage a business partner to ramp the recruitment as a recruitment process outsourcing, RPO, the new thingy, or probably design new frameworks or new methods of incentivizing your people. So no matter what you're looking at, the HR or human capital manager's role evolving. When you are a human capital manager, you are like a fund manager. You need to be understanding the risks and you need to be optimizing the fund. So there are several aspects that come into the picture. When you're attracting talent in the first phase again, you need to be leveraging the employer brand. So you are kind of working with the marketing group or what have you in terms of creating the brand. So you are quasi-marketing guy in that phase, in the attract. And when you are thinking of employee engagement, like what KK said, you need to be savvy of engaging with them in terse, simple, sweet, Twitter kind of messages or Facebooks or what have you. If you send them a 15-page mail or a policy, forget it. They will not even know what you're talking about. They'll say like, yeah, I know you sent me a mail, 10 pages, right? That's all they'll know. The volume of the mail, but not the content. So I think becoming more relevant in terms of to staying abreast with those, and particularly talking about the IT companies, often you hear people say, people are my assets. They walk in and out of the gates every day. The intellectual property correlates to people. So being a fund manager, or if your intellectual property is what you need to manage, you need to also understand a little bit about technology, the portfolio of technology. So there is a lot that is happening. It is not simply the attendance keeping, the wage paying, and probably managing the increments. That is not the HR. How the personnel department that we used to have many years ago, we used to call personnel managers, personnel departments, to HR, to human capital. I think I can probably even peel the onion in terms of employee engagement or development, the things that you create. People now learn, like I said, they learn on their own. They don't want to sit in a classroom and learn. So 70, 20, 10 is a proven model that probably many of you know. 70% of the learning happens on their own. Tell me what I need to learn, I'll figure it out at my convenience. Whatever I need to learn, and whenever I need to learn. 20% I would like to learn, probably by watching others, shadowing, or doing something. The 10% is what you can teach me. And the way we think about it is 90% teach and 10% let them go practice. That needs to change, right? So I think the HR manager's role is becoming extremely critical, becoming more strategic to understand the business cycles and to manage the portfolio of talent that one would have, and creating this innovative techniques of paying people on time, paying competitively, giving them the room to take the risks that we spoke about. Probably you can speak about that topic for at least couple of hours, talking about how do you create an environment where people can take risk, right? I remember my early job, I can tell you very simply, working in an Indian company before I went to US, I used to look at, I was a mechanical engineer. I used to look at the drawing before I print 20,000 times, because once I issue the print command, it prints the pen, the ink, the print is going to be in a long line, and if the sheet of paper is wasted, my manager would chew me up. Simple. So I think 100 times, is the drawing ready? Is it complete? The engineering drawing is very complex, multiple sections and all that. And the same thing when I went to US, not that I was being reluctant and careless. You issue a print command, the paper comes out, you throw it. It's like trash. Okay, one more. So you have the resources and you're not afraid of doing mistakes. And actually, I was working on a similar field, but I got more patents that I could file while in that country. So creating the environment of having not irresponsibility, but abundance of resources, and so that you start worrying about the right things, not worrying about wasting paper or wasting ink, but worrying about the design and optimization of the design. So the focus should be kept on the right things, and the managers chewing up, driving about what aspects of business are you focusing on? What are the KPIs, KRAs, or the business elements? If we can bring that from a HR angle, that ownership and that focus, I think we will evolve. HR has a super big role, by the way. That's why I get excited about jumping from IT to HR as a plug. Yeah.
Thanks, Murthy. Varinder, very straightforward question. You've heard all these people speak. Is it easier in a product company? Are your challenges of a different kind? Are they of a lesser magnitude because you're anyway doing what is at least currently very cool stuff, right? The way you look at it, you're where, like you said, you're in the sweet spot right now. So is it easier for you?
Yeah, first, let me start with taking a dig at why I left the outsourcing industry, the likes of Wipro, HCLs, and so on and so forth. After 28 years of working there, I realized towards the end of the career, it was all about how I can improve the margin by 25 basis points. If that meant an employee has to take 3 hops before it reaches destination or has to travel by train or something. Okay. So it is becoming, how to produce a ton of steel consuming less power. So it is all becoming a price game. So there was innovation lacking, there's nothing interesting, and if you had one unbilled resource on site, the head office will scream murder. What the hell is going on? So I said, let's move on to something more interesting. There's a lot happening on cloud, there's a lot happening on mobility, and this was a perfect opportunity. So about 1.5 years back, I took the plunge. Second thing is, being in a product company, also the mindset has to change. First is, I made sure that I don't sit in a cabin. I sit outside with the developers. Otherwise, everybody is boxed into a cabin. And second thing is, allow people to do what they want to do and not straight jacket them into very, very strict stuff that you do only this. So as Google says, 20% of the time you can pursue your own dream, own projects, own thoughts, own wildest things, and so on. So we try to create a Google kind of office in section of our office where you have swings, where you have sofas, where you have tatami mats, people sit on the ground and work, and so on and so forth. Apart from that, we are now building a cafe in office which will serve free. It's like Starbucks kind of atmosphere there. So we're trying to make it attractive for Gen Y company, trying to attract the best talent. Earlier we used to hire from tier 3, tier 4, all kind of colleges. Now we just hire from tier 1 because we hire few. We are a small company. We hire maybe 50. So we decided if we are going to compete with the best in the world, we need the best talent to work. So either somebody who joins us is tier 1 or doesn't join us. As simple as that. And people who join us because, not because they get the highest salary or something, because they are sharing a dream with us. They are sharing a dream of taking the big boys head on. And now we have a chance because we have cloud, we have mobility on our side. And
but you can also afford to be a lot more choosy, right? Because your needs are also, you don't need thousands
20,000 people, yeah. So we're in a business which demands fewer people. We don't have the visas problem, the H1Bs, and so on and so forth. So we are not hamstrung by any of the outsourcing industry issues. I think it becomes easier. It becomes a lot more fun. And in product, you can see the effect of your creation. Otherwise, you're working on the maintenance program of some big bank in US, and there's a team of 500 people maintaining something. I don't know how it can become very interesting. And in the business that we are in, after you've done 3 years of programming, you become manager, and then you manage the timesheets and the people who are coding. So that's how the pyramid keeps rising. And the only piece of innovation that I heard was how to make the pyramid more wider, or the base more flatter and flatter. If you go to outsourcing company, you will see 10 such things, That's the piece of innovation. So I thought this is a lot more interesting than what happens out there. So that's why.
Okay, thank you, Varinder. Mark, We heard a couple of things that I'd like your views on, especially because you've seen how large companies do this. I think it was KK who spoke about the fact that, sizes are different, makes sense to break it up, and you can do it. What else can large companies do, right? That's the first question I have for you. The second question I have for you, and after E answers, I'd be happy if everyone else sorts of jumps in. I see a fundamental fallacy in what we are discussing, and which is, the ecosystem has changed and everything else. But I think there is a qualitative difference between people who want to be innovative, entrepreneurial, build companies today than there was 20 years ago. Because I think 20 years ago, or even when KK started Mindtree along with a few others, I don't think he started it by looking at cashing out.
Absolutely.
Right? I think the outcome and the focus on the success is so much more today. And this thought came to me when he spoke about, how some of these guys want a cushy life where, their company will fund them, they get paid their salaries, there's someone who brings the coffee, like you said. But they're working in a startup, and I see some fallacy there. So, how do you get around that?
Sure, well, let's start with that question, because I think the desire for that cushy lifestyle is a wonderful motivator. I'm going to work hard because I like the car that guy's driving and I want that car. I like the neighborhood that guy's living in. I want even that. I think that's a wonderful motivation, actually. Wanting a soft, cushy life has probably motivated a lot of entrepreneurs over time, and if that's what gets them there, that's great. If they have a more altruistic vision, that's great as well. So I in no way discount being hungry for the good things in life as any way a bad instigator of entrepreneurial thinking. So I think it's fine to have that as your motivation. If you have other motivations, that's great as well. I'm a believer in equifinality. Anything that gets you to the right outcome is absolutely fine. And so if people are becoming entrepreneurs for whatever reason is motivating them, I think that's great. I think for the large company question, and again, I'm not going to provide any revolutionary answers. Most of what I do with companies is try to provide them with very clear, simple answers, because I think we overcomplicate a lot of these HR solutions. And when it comes to innovation, I think the recommendations, mirroring in many ways what Murthy said, we understand how to drive specific behaviors. We understand how to get the right people into our companies. So if we want innovative people in our organizations, let's start by defining that very clearly. One of the few most important things we want is innovation. Not to say here's a long list of 20 behaviors that are important in our company. If innovation is what's important, that should be one of these 3 things you say is critical for our organization. So very clearly defined at the top of the house, innovation is critical for these reasons. And after that, it's actually a somewhat mechanical process to make that work. Are you going to screen every candidate to understand what innovative capabilities they bring to the organization? So are you going to make sure that people who come into the organization have a bit more of an entrepreneurial mindset and innovative mindset than others? Are you going to reward them for that? So what are the rewards in place for acting in an entrepreneurial or innovative way? And are those so differentiated that people get a very clear message? That's a pretty good behavior to engage in. I'd like those rewards. I'm going to engage in that as well. Along with what I mentioned earlier, let's make sure managers are held accountable for that. So what should managers be doing to drive those entrepreneurial behaviors? Are they squashing out bright ideas? I need to deliver on that standard project before you start thinking on your own. So what are managers doing to encourage that? And then just the fundamentals. Are we helping people to understand the experiences that will allow them to be more entrepreneurial? Are we giving them exposure to the types of projects that will allow natural creativity to emerge? Back to my earlier point, are we giving the right people that exposure? Because we can only give so many people so much experience. So do we understand the 20% of our population who's more likely to display an entrepreneurial mindset than everyone else? And are we ensuring they have that support? Are we training people around it? It really is saying we have a lot of levers in HR to get people to behave the way we want them to behave. We can pay them, we can reward them, we can select them. There's lots of things we can do. have we aligned all of those levers against entrepreneurial behavior to ensure that people get a very clear, consistent message? This is what matters. We're going to have people in our company who have the potential to display this, and we're going to make sure people who do display it are well rewarded for their efforts.
Thank you, Mark. Does anyone else want to jump in and say something? No?
Just one quick thing, if I may.
Yeah, please.
To continue with what Mark has said, I think if you as a company are trying to build innovation as a culture, think about what are the seeds you're sowing. You know, you need to hire people who would be innovators. They're quite different from order takers who would just go execute. And so it starts from, you know, the journey when you're recruiting those people. And of course, relevance goes through every step of the way, how you are developing them, how you are incentivizing them and what have you, and how you're retaining them. So think all through the life cycle of an employee life cycle.
Yeah. I'll just like to add a few points on what Mark said. See, to a certain extent, I think there's nothing wrong in an entrepreneur believing that his primary purpose is to create value for the enterprise. But what I think is clearly undesirable is if you look at entrepreneurship as a slot machine. So I sort of pull the slot machine, I want all the time a big sort of bonus to come. And that's the primary purpose of me trying to make a thing. So I think there's a difference between creating value for your stakeholders, which includes you, vis-a-vis you deal with entrepreneurship as a slot machine. The second key mindset which entrepreneurs need to build is an innate sense of when to exit. Because in my role, I have the great advantage of working with a lot of entrepreneurs, and many times I've had this very uncomfortable conversation with entrepreneurs saying, nothing is wrong with your idea, nothing is wrong with your business, I think you are the bottleneck. Please get somebody else to run the company, because I think for different stages of the organization, you require different people. Well, when you start the business, you believe it's my idea and you get a very emotive connect with the business. But I think you need to have the ability to step back and say what is right for the enterprise, both from a financial angle as well as a managerial angle. There's a second observation, if you allow me, I'll just sort of make it, since we talked so much about people and how do we really sort of leverage the power of people to help our organizations become innovative. I think technology is an enabler, but at the same time it needs to be done with a human touch. I think that's very, very important. I know Virender and Murthy talked about how technology can make a great difference in sort of managing people, but what I find is it really can't be a substitute for that personal touch. I'll again recollect an example of a fairly serious disagreement I had with my talent acquisition team, because we had used the RPO and we've used a lot of technology. He was very proud, saying, okay, now we parse resumes from the web, and when there's a requirement, it matches automatically, and emails are sent to the people who fit that profile, and then there is an online test which gets done, and then a HR person interviews him on Skype, and an offer goes on email, and he comes and joins probably online itself. But the fact is, I think it can never sort of substitute the human touch, because when I ask people in terms of managers, have you spent a non-agenda time with your people? Do you know what their interests are? I think be it Gen X or Gen Y, that touch of human element has to be there. I think technology is an enabler, but I think sometimes we just sort of miss the context in terms of how to leverage technology with a human perspective. I think that's very, very important.
Thank you. We are going to start taking questions. Hopefully some questions will show up on this. Right now it's just, in the meanwhile, can we have the lights on in the hall? I can't see anyone. I can see this gentleman here, but I can't see anyone else. So that, and are there mics to go around them? Yes, please. Introduce yourself, ask a question, and someone please, I noticed that there seem to be a lot of questions there. If we can get them onto the monitor in some way. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Karthik. I have a specific question. In India, we still emphasize more on academic excellence instead of work experience, irrespective of whatever the work experience a person carries. So my basic question is, should we emphasize more on a person what he has done in the innovation and what kind of contribution and the application a person has brought onto the table, or should we harp on the academics a person tried to get it? Today we watch LinkedIn, or today we go through the Monster or any portal. People constantly say that we need people from Excel or this or probably, IIMs or nothing against these best of the management institutes. But as panel rightly said, innovation can come across from any student across any academic college or background. Are we inclined to see that and wear a conscious mindset hat to overcome this?
Okay, Murthy, can you take that?
Thank you. Thanks, Sukumar. I think, yes, we have to shift significantly from qualification-based hiring to competency, based hiring and expertise-based hiring. I think when you describe somebody by saying, he's an XLRI graduate or IMA graduate or mechanical engineer with blah years of experience, it doesn't tell me anything. What have you done during those years of experience? What kind of environment have you worked in? What kind of behaviors, competencies have you, demonstrated? And what are the credentials, business achievements that you have had? So I think that needs to become more prominent, as opposed to just talking about, the qualifications or what is your CGPA or what have you. I think that's happening, by the way. And I think, as I say, that will only get your resume to be looked at for probably 5 more seconds, in my opinion, as a recruiter is going through. But I think it's going to be, you need to put a round peg in a round hole, and it is not the qualifications that determine it, but it's the experience and competencies that determine the success of the candidate.
Next question, please. The lady here in the first row. Can we get a mic to her, please? Who wants to ask the next question? If you put your hand up, a mic will come to you. Yes, please, gentlemen there. Can we get a mic there so that we can, yeah.
My basic question is that why do you need entrepreneurial energy in a services organization? How does that help? I do understand that it helps in a product company, but how does it help in a services organization? And my takeoff is from Mark's point where he said 10% of innovation or some percentage of innovation or entrepreneurial energy is good, but some of it may be a waste of time. The reason I'm saying this is that understanding a customer's need or understanding the market or your client is probably more important than entrepreneurial energy in a services organization. And in a country like ours, where there's so much of services happening, why is entrepreneurial energy so important?
Thank you. KK, all yours.
No, it's very interesting because what I do believe is, I think entrepreneurial is not necessarily anybody starting a business with an intention of getting customers. I think entrepreneurship is also having that unrelenting dedication to solve a customer's problem and do it in the best manner possible. So are you constantly upping the bar? Are you looking for solutions, not just within your organization, but within your ecosystem to bring the best to the customer? Yeah. So I think it just goes beyond an idea. It's about how much you're customer-centric, how much you're thinking or really dreaming for the customer. And that's really what I think is the spirit of entrepreneurship in a services business. And I think that needs to be there because I think customers are no more just wanting you to deliver a service. I think they're wanting you to come in and say, what is it you're going to help me? Because ultimately, I think people do believe they want to be successful in their business. So how are you as a real partner helping them succeed in business, which is where the spirit of entrepreneurship needs to be different. I agree it's very different in the context of a product organization. Again, to be fair, I think it's not that everybody in the product organization is entrepreneurial. I think you need to have a set of product managers, a think tank who really need to do that.
Mark, you wanted to add something to this?
Well, no, I think it's especially important to innovate in the services field for a few reasons. I think, let's start with services get stale and boring just like products get stale and boring. And I've run a major consulting firm, and trust me, your clients want to see something new. And that new might be something as basic as you're doing whatever you did before faster, you're doing it cheaper, you're doing it to a higher level of quality. Those are, while incremental innovations still count as innovative. But it's very easy for whatever you deliver to become commoditized instantly if you aren't at least moving the ball forward in a different way on a regular basis. So I would say that the innovation in services is clearly a differentiating factor. Now, to your point, does everyone need to be differentiating 24/7? Probably not. But let's understand what are our clients looking for and make sure that we're always ahead of them on the services side as well.
Okay, thank you, Mark. All right, there's a question from Twitter for Mark. Won't it be amazing if a larger crowd in an organization becomes innovative instead of a small group? No.
Short answer, the more great entrepreneurs that we have, the more great entrepreneurial thinking we have, obviously the better things are for our company. I think there's a difference between what my boss might think is entrepreneurial thinking and what I might think is entrepreneurial thinking. So I don't think we want to squash anyone from coming up with great new ideas, but I'm going to guess your experience would tell you that lots of people have ideas and some people have good ideas. And we need to encourage all those ideas, but let's make sure we're rewarding the ones that truly are going to add value to our company. And I think there's a careful balance there where we keep a very positive, a kind of engaging mindset in the organization around being entrepreneurial, but that we're not saying that we want always want to have brilliant ideas coming from everyone, because we're probably going to get a lot of noise and not as much signal as we want to see there.
All right. Any more questions? Yeah, there's a Jen. Yeah, you've got the mic. Yes, please.
Yeah, hi. My name is Vaitishwaran. Great discussions, but I see clearly some amount of slant onto the IT. Maybe because you chuck a stone in Bangalore, you'll still end up finding somebody in IT industry. I have a perspective which I wanted to bring across, and then maybe a small question to the panel. We're talking about innovation in the industry. I'm now from the supply side after having worked in the IT also. I look after education for Manipal today globally. And I see significant amount of innovation happening in the higher education space globally, be it in terms of the pedagogy, be it in terms of use of technology, be it in terms of curriculum and so on and so forth. I heard someone talk about the sage at the stage in terms of how somebody goes onto the stage and the professor teaches. Very, very different ways of, I'm sure the group here knows, 2 years back there was a Stanford development which came up as Coursera, where today it's taken the world by storm, that you can go ahead and register sitting in a remote part of India and take up a program on certification on Coursera from Stanford. Now the question to the panel is that I heard the gentleman from Randstad say that you saw in terms of wanting to get the development of your people. Why doesn't the industry look a little ahead before just getting people on board? While some of the industry today is working actively with educational institutions in terms of getting people on, it's still to do with getting the hitting the ground running, maybe from IT world, reducing the bench. Yeah, can they work on this?
Yeah, got your question. I think KK should answer it because he also represents NASSCOM, right? So,
see, I think it's already happening, probably not as well articulated and shared, that certainly a lot of institutions, and there is a whole set of new entrepreneurs who have come up, really in terms of encouraging finishing schools. At least for the IT industry today, I can off my head reel out 10 to 15 organizations which are primarily in the space of trying to prepare people who have been made offers at least a year ahead, getting them industry ready by the time they really come into the organizations. As an industry level, I think we're also closely interacting with the AICT to change the curriculum, because I think our customer needs are changing, so we need to influence the policy making level in terms of what changes and curriculum are made. And one of the key things which NASSCOM achieved in the last 2 to 3 years is to really evolve a public-private partnership in terms of starting at 17 states, institutes like IEEE, which are public-private institutions, which the government has started out, and it's already started functioning in 3 states. So I think fundamentally you have to address it at the source of the problem, which is curriculum, getting good faculty, in fact trying to increase the number of doctoral candidates in computer science. So addressing the source through policy interventions, working with the entrepreneurial ecosystem to help them, make them ready for the industry. And of course, like you rightly said, changing the whole mindset in terms of how do you make learnability something which is an ongoing activity within the enterprise.
Can I just quickly say
Yes,
something?
please.
I think just a slightly different opinion, maybe, while I agree and align with what KK has said. I don't believe finishing schools, I consider finishing schools as a band-aid solution, right? When somebody goes through a 4-year schooling and then you tell them that he has to again go through a 6-month or a 1 year or something, it is like, it is ludicrous, in my opinion. But so we need to probably go to the root cause and then fix it, like what KK said. That's why I said I agree in terms of the curriculum, whatever is being taught, so that it is more relevant and makes more sense. Yeah.
Correct, which is why I describe it not as a band-aid, but as first aid, right? Because the curriculum is just so bad in most cases. Okay, we'll take one more question from the audience, and then I have a question from Twitter which needs some fleshing out, which I will do and ask Mark. I can't. Yes, please. Sorry.
Good morning to all of you. Myself Manish from Apollo Hospitals. My question to panel is that what is your prescription basically from intent to action to start our entrepreneurial journey?
You've
Hello?
lost me.
Intent to action on what?
Sorry.
What is the prescription from your end? I mean, to start the journey of entrepreneurship from intent to action.
Okay.
Because we have got a lot of inertia,
Okay, thank you.
sense of fear and all this. Very common question.
From intent to action, your prescription for entrepreneurship. Who wants to take it? Virinder?
First is, you should have a path-breaking idea, and not because you lost a job or boss was angry with you and stuff like that. And you should have an idea which is truly meritorious. Second is, you must talk to some people in the industry and see what you think is bright is really bright, and it's not been done 100 times elsewhere. And then secure some funding if you don't have your father's money to fund you. And then be on the job, set some goals, and then live your dream after that.
Never give up. Never give up. If you want to be an entrepreneur, keep trying. It will click.
Maybe I'll just add a few things. I think apart from the idea which Virender said, I think what is very important is to articulate well what is really the purpose of starting a business, because I think that's something which really brings in people together. And where is it you want to take people? Because I think people don't want to follow leaders or a business where you don't know where you're going, and really build it based on values. I think these three, irrespective of today or 20 years from now, I think are very fundamental elements where I think you need to think through before starting an entrepreneurship. What I also see relevant in today's context is really the ability to continuously keep learning and having an unending curiosity, because I think gone are the times when you could say, okay, I've learned and now for the next 10 years I don't need to do anything except sort of direct people. So that learnability and unending curiosity is very, very important in entrepreneurship. Like Murthy rightly said, the positive optimism. I think an entrepreneur cannot at any time believe that, hey, the ecosystem is completely sort of not supporting me, so where am I going? I think positive optimism is really a force multiplier. The third aspect which I think is very important is humility. I think gone are the days when you think you know everything. I think you need to learn from unusual sources. You need to learn from people across the organization. So humility, I think, is very, very important. And lastly, I think being collaborative, because I think not all solutions are within your organizations. Your ability to network across the ecosystem, collaborate with unusual partners, and solve your problems. I think those are other things which I think is very important.
Thank you. And of course, I have to say something here because everyone said very positive things. Unfortunately, I think the entry barriers have become so low that it's fairly easy for almost anyone to start a business which is doing anything. It could be the 23rd travel website or the 34th website which is selling shoes. Someone will start something and everything. So you have to be cynical to a little bit. So forget everything that people said about being positive and all that, but because quite often just because it's your idea, it's not a great idea. It's a lousy idea.
I think if you're the 34th website, you won't get the funding from a VC as
well.
Right? So differentiation is key.
You'd be surprised. You'd be very surprised. The greater fool theory is in full flow in India. Right? Okay. There's one final question. I want Mark to comment on this. It came on Twitter. It's an interesting question. How do companies decide what they want? I'm trying to flesh this out a little bit. Entrepreneurs, innovators. It's a rare company that will go out and say, I'm not innovative. Right? It's almost, every company wants to be innovative. It's a rare organization that says we are not entrepreneurial, we don't encourage entrepreneurship and everything else. How do companies really decide what they want to do? Because and you mentioned this several times, what do you want? What do you want your people to work on? Things like that. So how do companies get?
So is the question, Sukumar, how do companies or how do they decide what they want their people to do?
How do
so
they
is this
decide?
more a strategic
Correct.
question around what does a company want to do, which is not my area of expertise?
How do they decide what they want their people to do?
Yeah, I have a very clear perspective that to me it really is the role of the CEO and the senior team to understand the business well enough that they can help to translate that into the few differentiating capabilities that are going to allow the company to deliver on that goal. So if we're trying to make a widget, then the senior team should understand I need the men and women in my company to do 3 things extraordinarily well to be able to develop that widget and to really help them to focus on those 3 things. I find the lack of focus is one of the key distractions in most organizations, is that we ask employees to do 40 different things. And there are probably 40 very important things, but out of those 40, there are probably 3 that actually truly contribute value to the customer and to the business, to the shareholder. And my view is a fairly simple one on that. The senior team should have enough knowledge about their business, about their marketplace. Not that they need to translate that into human resource terms, but they should be able to say in the language of an ordinary person, I need people who do this, this, and this. That will allow this company to win. And then back to my earlier comments, great, we now know those 3 things. Let's integrate that into every single thing that we do to build people in this company. Stop distracting people with kind of, here are the 48 things that make a good leader. That's fine, I'm sure there are. But here are the 3 things that are going to allow this company to be successful.
Thank you, Mark. That's it. We're done. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience, and thank you very much. I found the discussion very, very stimulating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. If I could request you all to just remain where you are and request Mr. Amit Garg to please do us the honors of presenting small tokens of appreciation to all our guests. We'd like to start, Amit, by presenting to Mr. Krishna Kumar, to Mr. Mohanupalluri, Mr. Virender Agarwal, Mark Efron, and to Mr. Virender Agarwal. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We've had a very interactive session. We will now take a break for lunch and return for the keynote by Mr. Mark Efron, which is driving race cars in the dirt. So 45 minutes, and please be back here on time for us to start with Mark's address.